Brought to you by DK Audio.
DK Audio presents The Military History Book, Big Ideas Simply Explained, by DK. Read by Charles Armstrong. Introduction. Military history is the study of armed conflict, a constant in human societies for millennia. Prehistoric cave art from around 10,000 BCE depicts small groups of archers in combat, while ancient mass graves suggest larger battles. Full-blown war as a more organized, collective enterprise occurred from around 2700 BCE. Mesopotamia is thought to have had the first standing army, with which its ruler Sargon carved out his Akkadian empire. Emerging as a nation 1,000 years later, the Assyrians were equally warlike and notoriously ruthless, but also innovative, pioneering a style of siege warfare that endured for more than 2,000 years. As their empire fell, the Babylonian Empire rose to replace it, a pattern endlessly repeated over hundreds of years. War was always spreading, and its weapons and strategies would be constantly rethought and refined. Power, land, and wealth were potent incentives for rulers and their closest circle, people who had fought their way to the top. The fruits of victory enriched this elite, who then sought lasting grandeur, building temples, palaces, and tombs that helped define nations and gave them their identity. With identity came patriotism that encouraged warriors to defend their land against foreign aggressors. Rulers also promised their subjects protection in exchange for their service in time of war, and death in battle was celebrated in epic poetry, which elevated heroic warriors to a godlike status, convincing them that valor was the path to glory. Inspiring armies. Because war is seldom less than bloody and terrifying, the ability to motivate an army is vital. From Alexander the Great to Napoleon Bonaparte, there were certain great leaders who had that gift, who could inspire commanders, know their forces' strengths and weaknesses, and use effective battle strategies. Before the era of more sophisticated propaganda, it was their charisma that galvanized armies to fight to the death. Religious zeal could be equally inspiring, driving Arab warriors of the 7th century CE to spread the word of Islam by force, Christian crusaders to take back the Holy Land, and individuals such as Joan of Arc to perform remarkable feats of bravery. Rulers also used the cloak of religion as a pretext for expanding their lands. Other triggers for war were the miseries of oppression, destitution, and exploitation. The enslaved rose up, the impoverished revolted, and subjugated nations and ethnic groups fought for independence. Revolutions have occurred in the Americas, Europe, Africa, and across Asia. Tactics and weapons. The battlefield has also been an important arena of technological innovation, which in turn produces new strategic thinking. The ancient Greeks, for instance, refined the weapons and tactics of earlier civilizations, grouping their heavily armed infantry, hoplites, in near impregnable blocks, phalanxes, up to 12 men deep, which proved far more effective than fighting in hand-to-hand combat. More mobile units made hoplites obsolete. Just as much later, Muslim light cavalrymen outstripped and outmaneuvered the armoured knights of medieval Europe, who also proved vulnerable to the arrows of the English longbow. From the late Middle Ages, firearms reduced the use of close combat, while cannon fire that could breach city walls put an end to traditional siege warfare. Pitted against the primitive weapons of indigenous peoples, firearms also gained colonies in the New World and Africa for European imperial powers. The repeating carbines and automatic handguns invented in the 19th century gave rise to semi-automatic rifles and machine guns used in both world wars, where powerful artillery was also employed to devastating effect. Artillery transformed naval warfare too. The forces aboard galleys or later sailing ships would attempt to ram, then board their opponents' vessels. From the 15th century, cannons were placed on sailing ships to bombard enemy vessels from afar. Believing that naval superiority was essential for its national security, Britain built up a fleet of warships with mounted cannons that from the 18th century made its Royal Navy the strongest in the world. A century later, when steamships were developed, the US was the first nation to use them militarily, against Britain in the War of 1812. By the early 20th century, steam power for warships was ceding to diesel power, then to integrated fossil fuel systems, while a number of today's aircraft carriers and submarines are powered by small nuclear reactors. Aerial warfare arrived in the early 20th century. In World War I, fighter planes skirmished, the first bombs were dropped, and aerial photography aided reconnaissance. Less than 30 years later, 2 atomic bombs dropped from American planes obliterated the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ending World War II. More recently, remote-controlled guided rockets, cruise missiles, and drones have further distanced aggressors from opponents and the deaths and destruction caused. War rationale. The frightening knowledge that human ingenuity and technical brilliance could produce weapons that would wipe out life on Earth has neither ended wars nor the arms race between nations. In the Cold War era, Western strategy was underpinned by what U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. The U.S. government justified massive increases in military spending, highlighting the threat posed by the nuclear bombs and missiles of the USSR, whose communist leaders similarly claimed to be protecting their people from Western warmongers. This continues to be the case today. As the military history book recounts, war has evolved in multiple ways over 4,500 years. Its causes and characteristics have proved infinitely varied, its technologies have been remarkable, and little indicates that it will ever end. When battle approaches, when war arises, the plans of the gods, beloved by the gods, are destroyed. Sumerian proverb, 3rd millennium BCE. Wars invariably serve as classrooms and laboratories where men and techniques and states of mind are prepared for the next war. Wendell Berry, American novelist, born 1934. Ancient warfare. 3500 BCE to 500 CE. Around 12,000 years ago, a temperate climate in the so-called Fertile Crescent in the Middle East and Egypt's Nile Valley encouraged people to settle in groups and grow crops. In time, they fought over issues such as natural resources and trading routes. In the first recorded conflict, some 4,700 years ago, in Mesopotamia, the two sides did battle with sickles, spears, and copper and bronze axes. Early empires rise and fall. Sargon I, who ruled Akkad, a kingdom in Mesopotamia, from 2334 to 2279 BCE, assembled an early professional army of archers and infantry deployed in phalanxes, block formations. His forces conquered lands from the Persian Gulf to the eastern Mediterranean, creating the world's first empire. Wherever a powerful dynasty arose, others were soon poised to take its place. By around 2047 BCE, the city of Ur had conquered its neighbors in southern Mesopotamia, and its dynasty created a new empire. This in turn fell to Assyria, whose rulers built an even greater empire and further refined the tactics and strategy of war. The Assyrians pioneered siege warfare with earth ramps, battering rams, and wheeled towers built by their innovative engineers. They also used terror tactics, decapitating, flaying, and impaling victims, as they forged a huge empire that reached its height in the early 1st millennium BCE. Meanwhile, the ancient Egyptian civilization was flourishing along the Nile River. The Hyksos, a Middle Eastern people who seized power in Egypt around 1640 BCE.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?